Recording is on.
Okay, so welcome to the Mastering Lightning Network Reading Group session here, and I will hand it straight over to Thunder Biscuit, our man in command for today.
Hello, everyone. I'm surprised we're 16 people. This is so awesome. Listen, this started as just a desire for me to force myself to read it and maybe read it with one or two other people. I didn't really know where it was going to go. And I'm basically part of two Bitcoin communities, the Bitcoin Design Guide and the Bitcoin Dev Kit. And so I just sort of posted in both channels, both servers at once, and a bunch of people responded. They were interested. So I think we've got a good mix of different backgrounds and different people. So epic. I'm really excited for this. And that's sort of what I had. I've been teaching a workshop on Android development using the Bitcoin Dev Kit for the past 2 days with Chaincode Labs and the Summer of Bitcoin project. So it was super fun, but also very busy. And I managed to read my two chapters, but barely. I finished a few minutes ago. So that's what I had to say. I think that's it. I think I want to mention, just to be really clear, is that I'm not actually an Android. I'm not a Lightning developer or anything. So I'm really learning Lightning as I go with this. I know the basics, and I've used Lightning on my phone, but I wasn't like coming into this offering my expertise and services as an Android, as a Lightning developer. So I'll be sort of going through it with everyone else.
Awesome. Yeah, sorry to throw you in the deep end there, but you were the person who started it. So just about the format, what you mentioned was that the way this usually works is people kind of read ahead of time, and then somebody just summarizes the pages real quick, and then we just kind of loosely go into questions and then answers. And maybe one person already said earlier that they didn't have the time to read up ahead of time. So how many, I don't know what the right way is to poll this. How many did have a chance to read up ahead of time, and how many didn't?
I think there's a button with a hand raise. We could use that.
Yeah. Okay, so okay, two people would like to speak. Please just go ahead.
Oh, no, wait. Sorry.
Okay.
That does the hand raise.
Okay, so everybody who's raising their hands, I assume you read it, right?
I guess the chat is probably better for that.
Okay.
Hey, Christoph, I'm not sure if you can see this, but like when I'm in grid view, I just see like little emojis flying all over the screen.
I see them too. We just need to agree on what they mean.
So I mean, I'm seeing like a tons of thumbs up flying around everywhere. So I'm assuming that means a lot of people read it.
I see one unhappy face.
a lot of ta-das, a lot of celebrations.
Yeah, some people are...
Cool, keep it going.
I don't even know what that means.
But maybe we start with the summary anyways. So
yeah,
Thunder Biscuit,
I'll throw in some. I can throw some of the ideas that I had for this, maybe just so everybody's sort of on the same page and the recording shows like what the goal was. But I made a sort of a landing page that I think we can share the link. We can share the link. And this right now is pretty empty, but I was picturing us using it at least as an agenda to know what chapters are expected for each week. And then if you have, maybe if you have ideas on other resources that you'd like to add, we can put a link on the other resources column there, where we could offer other links for people who want to sort of like side readings or side videos to watch, that kind of thing. For me, it felt like one of the problems with the Lightning Network is if you've gone through probably like the typical you might have sort of looked at the Chain Code Labs Lightning Protocol development curriculum, and that is just a gigantic list of things to read and go through, and it throws you in the deep end really quickly, and so it felt like it's a lot. And so I thought that the reading group would gain from having a very, very focused purpose, where like the only thing we're doing is to read a particular chapter, and the expectation for coming into the reading group is just that you've read the chapter. You can certainly come and listen to it if you haven't, but at the same time, I think we should also expect the discussion to be around things that are about the chapter or people who've read the chapter. So if you haven't read the chapter, I would say it'd be sort of like off base to come in and ask other people to tell you what the chapter was about, rather. Do you know what I mean? So that's kind of like my idea. Just a single expectation is that the chapter is read and the discussion is about that chapter. And then everything else is sort of a satellite task or satellite ideas, or like, things like testing the wallets. I think there's a lot of like gains to be made for like trying out pieces of code that we might find in different places, or watching other videos, or recommending other videos. But if the expectation becomes that all of this has been tried, then it sort of like diffuses the power of the reading group, and I think it makes it hard to show up and like feel confident if it's expected that you've read all the stuff and you've seen all the Matt Corallo videos and the Jimmy Song videos. So that's all I had to say. This is obviously I'm just one member of this reading group, but that's what I had in mind.
Anybody else want to speak to any expectations or thoughts, concerns, ways they'd like to organize this or not?
Actually, I have a question. Since we're a large group, should we try to use one of these features like the hand raise thing and have who's ever moderating sort of pick folks? I don't know if that will be helpful if we have a lot of people wanting to speak. I haven't used this Jitsi as often, so I don't know if it's a feature you normally use.
Typically, we don't use it in any organized fashion, but we can.
Okay. Well, I guess we could see how it goes. If we get too many people talking at once, we could do something different.
Yeah, I guess from my personal expectation and background, it's more as a designer. And I think I started talking about this earlier a little bit. There's always a line for me where it gets a bit too technical, because in some ways I'm more around understanding basically how these things generally work and some of the mechanics. I don't necessarily need to know super technical details, but it's more for me understanding enough so I can figure out what the user experiences should be like. So if let's say resources that I would look into would be maybe these BTC sessions video where he tries out different wallets and these types of things, that would be more my interest.
Yeah, that was going to be one. Hi, I'm John. It was going to be one of my concerns with this. I think after the first couple of chapters, the book actually gets extremely technical, like deep diving into how to construct the actual transactions and the script that's used, to ensure the fair participation that he talks about in the first chapter. So I wasn't sure how that was going to work exactly, as we get into the more technical end of the book.
I'd be looking forward to see how the node is broken, like the different parts of the node and how it gets broken up, and perhaps if
I don't
they
think
talk about
we can hear you well,
offloading
John.
this to like web services.
I can hear him, Alexa. I don't know if others could hear him. I was able to hear John's.
Was it garbled for any of you, or is it just me?
It was kind of breaking up for me as well.
Yeah, cool. So Anybody else want to speak generally about the format or anything else, or should we just kind of pull up one of the pages? Anybody had any urgent questions, things that are burning on their minds that they really wanted to ask or bring up about those 2 pages? How would you like to start?
Can I just share a quick image here? I was trying to copy it and put it in, but hang on. I figured since this is something about learning about lightning, I started working on a little logo. Let me see if I can. Where do I have it? I'm sorry, I'm taking up a little bit of time. Map. I have a Figma file for it. Okay. Figma here. Okay, lightning Figma. I think it's this one. Yep. And I figured we should have some kind of encouraging thing to begin with. And I thought of an owl with a lightning. I don't know if any of you guys like it, but I thought maybe it'd be something to cheer the beginning of the first lesson.
I like it. Let's make that the logo.
Okay. I want to mention that somebody's here that is actually hosting a very similar reading group in Atlanta. So Stephen, if I'm not mistaken, you and the people from some other group in Florida are actually co-hosting this very similar reading group. So and you had some sort of lessons learned for us a few days ago in some meeting that I was part of. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, I'm happy to share. I honestly don't remember what I said. Was this on the design jam the other day?
I don't even know.
Maybe. Oh, okay. Yeah, I think I remember somebody asked me, but well, yeah. I mean, I can speak more generally about it. I don't know. You just mean like lessons that we've learned from doing these kinds of book clubs before? Yeah, I mean,
and what you guys are doing, I think you were telling me that somebody's a host per week or something like that.
Yeah, the way we kind of break it up usually is pretty similar to today to kind of like how you're kind of like leading this session. So we typically break it up, so if there's somebody in the group who we know, is really, well versed with the content of a particular chapter, like if somebody's, really, good into like the deep math stuff, they might cover a chapter that's really dense in cryptography, right? Or if somebody's really into like the open source community stuff, they might talk about a chapter that deals more with, how the protocol is collaborated on, that kind of stuff, right? So yeah, just usually one person, same basic deal. Everybody, needs to read the chapter in advance and be familiar with the subject matter. But one person will kind of take the lead for the chapter and lead everybody, kind of through the discussion that week. And sometimes it's really informal, like the person will just go through and highlight pages with, sentences that they wanted to talk about, key points that they thought were important. And other times they might, prepare an actual presentation or like a little PowerPoint of stuff that they kind of supplemental stuff that they thought worked. And we usually, sometimes it's formal or informal depending on how many people are remote or not, but we try to have the presenter present and then do some on-topic Q&A, and then afterwards do some kind of informal discussion after that. And I guess I'd just say, that, I mean, the thing to, I guess, I learned from that is that, as long as everybody's there in the kind of group environment to support each other, I think it'll still be fun for people, even if the material gets too dense for somebody, because it's like really dense texts you typically don't understand on your first try. I feel that way, at least. If a text is really dense and really complicated, you have to read it twice. You have to read it once just to kind of, so your brain learns the kind of patterns and the way that the author writes, and you get an overview of the material, but you don't get it your first time through. And it's when you talk about it and when you start reading it a second time, that's kind of, I think, where the magic starts to happen. So, I just would say no pressure. It's like, there shouldn't be any pressure that anybody needs to, understand every single page or anything like that. Just, try to do the reading and, don't be afraid to ask questions and just enjoy it.
That sounds good to me. That's the kind of thing I think we should do.
So does anybody want to kick us off with any questions? Or should we just go through the pages and people ask questions as we go? What would you like to do? I mean, we have these two pages here. One is the introduction, which is really just very general, like basic concepts, why it exists, why Lightning is the way it is, some of its unique properties, a topic around trust and kind of the game theory behind it, which I thought was super interesting. It's a little bit abstract. I always find it interesting to see how that actually gets executed and how that plays out in in actual usage. And then we have the second page, the getting started one, where Alice gets a new wallet, gets her Bitcoin on Lightning, and then makes a payment. What were some things that stood out to people? Were there any questions, any areas you felt were just too complicated, or was it all pretty straightforward?
Actually, I really like the game theory. Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just saying, I really like the game theory explanation, even though it was a bit abstract. It was probably something most people that aren't familiar with this kind of stuff. Definitely in my family, we use that little trick about one person splits, the other person decides, and it was a nice way to introduce that subject, I thought. And also that he focused a lot at the beginning on usage, like looking at it kind of from the outside as a user. So I thought that was a nice way to introduce the subject.
You have a fairness protocol.
Yeah, I hadn't heard this fairness protocol term before, and I feel like I've been around enough of this stuff. I should have heard it by now, but it's really helpful to have some of these terms kind of like a little more explicit and kind of have definitions for things and I know that the game theory vaguely, so it's nice to get like more specific about it. It was interesting to me for the two chapters that like the first one was actually a lot of new concepts to me, or a lot of new specifics that I didn't really know. And then the second one was like, if you had asked me like, hey, write down everything you know about Lightning, I think I would have written the second one. It's just like, well, here's how you download a wallet, and here's how you use it, and here's how it works. That's more of my knowledge right now. So I'm kind of excited to get into the other part of it.
I liked, actually, if we were jumping around to like the second chapter, I also really liked him sort of tableizing some of that information, because I haven't looked at every single Lightning wallet either, and to have somebody kind of summarize that matrix of on-chain, off-chain, custodial, non-custodial, a full node versus sort of these light versions of a Lightning node. I liked having that all condensed sort of in that one section. I thought that was a nice way to present that also. Because there was a lot of variety, more variety actually, I guess. I liked, just more variety than just custodial or non-custodial.
Yeah, and that section kind of explains almost directly why it's gonna be harder to use a wallet where you have more responsibilities, because you are literally managing more things. There's more things that you're in control of. Therefore, there's just naturally going to be more challenge in that user experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I liked seeing also the matrix, like Steve said, because I feel like I want to try a few, and this sort of clears it up a little bit. Yeah, you want to try, and I haven't tried Declare, so yeah.
Yeah, hey, I want to try Eclair also now.
I tried
I actually
Phoenix,
didn't.
which is really cool, but
Oh.
if they're very, very different, even if it's the same team. And for me, the other thing was like the whole mental model for what is it, what's happening on mobile, right, is different than so. And if you talk about Bitcoin on mobile, for me, it's on chain. I mean, it's super clear what you're doing and the trade-offs and like, you know, the SPV versus the Electrum server connection, and then I know what's happening. But then with Lightning, it's a bit blurry in my mind exactly what happens there and the node. And are you running sort of like one of these little nodes on your phone partially or whatnot? And then you know, we know that about the channel state and whatever, and you can lose if you lose channel state, you can lose your funds. And so what happens there with the keeping track of all of that?
It was news to me that Neutrino is listed as a third-party node, which I always thought it was some sort. You were like running a node yourself. It was just really lightweight somehow.
Well, it actually isn't third-party. I mean, it's a light protocol to a full node in theory. So, but it's definitely not. You're not a full peer on the Bitcoin network. You're still sort of you're trusting potentially one or more full nodes to, but it's like less trust, I think, than you would have. Less trust than you would have with Electrum, but more trust than you would have if you were running a full node on your device, like directly connecting to your own full node. You know, it's yeah, that's my kind of take on it. Because yeah, you are talking directly to a full node that supports that compact block filter protocol.
Yeah, so
I don't think he gets into that, does he? At least not now.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's even better than that. I feel like it's sort of the best option if you're not running a full node. And the only difference, in my opinion, is that you're not saving the historic state. So you're not saving all of the old blocks to then serve to other clients. But with Neutrino, you can still connect to the peer-to-peer network the same way you would with your full node and use a variety of peers to validate your transactions. And so, in my opinion, it's sort of the best solution that we have today for at least on mobile and possibly even desktop for people who don't want to do the initial block download. And so, yeah, I thought that as well when I read this, that he kind of sort of misclassifies it and makes it sound like you're just trusting this other person when that's not really the reality.
Maybe we can make a PR.
Yeah, it is hard.
I'm wondering if anybody.
It is hard to describe because it is this weird hybrid where you don't save all the blocks, but you also aren't connecting necessarily to a single node. So it is a complicated and kind of newish paradigm. It's not well adopted right now, and so hopefully we see more adoption because I think it's a great way forward, especially for mobile.
John, I wonder if you would like to speak about because for me, like, we use different terms for what I think is the same thing. So, you know, when you say, well, SPV, I think is different, but then, you know, people will say light node. And so that'll be, maybe they mean like SPV, and then Neutrino, BIP 157, 158. So that's three things already. And then compact block filters. So yeah. I got all these things, and like, is that all the same thing? If it is, then I'm just going to put them in the same box in my mind, right?
Yeah, it's almost all the same thing. Let me clarify a little bit for you. So SPV, I think it's simple payment verification, was sort of the original take, like the first pass on doing a light client. And I guess that term is very overloaded as well. Like light client in my head mostly means, at least for Bitcoin, that you're not saving all the blocks, so you don't have to do the full initial block download, and you're not serving blocks to people. That's sort of how I use the term. I guess there's probably other ways to define it, but And so in SPV, the problem was one of mostly privacy. So in order to do this, you're actually notifying, like you're telling the nodes, the peers you're connected to on the network, something about which transactions you're interested in. And so they get to learn a little bit more about your wallet. And so you lose some privacy if you use SPV. And so what you're calling neutrino, BIP157, and compact block filters is sort of this new idea, which is compact block filters, which is BIP157 and 158. And neutrino just happens to be, I think it's written in Go. It's sort of was the first node implementation that actually implemented BIP157. And so people use that term because it was the only implementation at the time, neutrino. And so now that it's in core, I feel like that term will probably go away, and we'll just call it, compact block filters or bit whatever. I mean, most people don't refer to things by bit number. Well, I guess they do, but so yeah, it's compact block filters, and it's this new way to do a light client where you don't have to tell other people anything about the transactions and the addresses that you care about. So it's a more privacy preserving way to have a node that doesn't need to download all the blocks.
And the trade-off space there, I'm not super familiar with it. I think it has to do with the amount of use sort of like upload and download you do. If you're a node, if you're a normal node and you want to participate in this compact block filter system, it's like an extra flag you need to turn on, and then the requirements on your node are much heavier. Am I right in this? Or it's
sort of a debate we had in the BDK channel about this, but yeah, you turn on this flag. Right now it's off by default in core, but you can turn it on, and it means you'll start to build these filters and these filter block headers that you can then serve to other people. And it's my understanding, which may be incorrect, but is that this by itself is not actually much overhead in terms of bandwidth or storage for your node. What I think, I don't know his real name, but Merch was talking to me in the BDK Slack about this, and he said in practice he was one of the early adopters of compact block filters. So he was one of the few nodes that had this on, and so every single LND neutrino user, like all their users, were connecting to him, and so he was seeing extremely high bandwidth usage, but I think it's because he was one of the few people actually serving these headers. So in theory, once this gets more adopted across the network, hopefully it will, there actually shouldn't be much overhead at all. These headers and filter blocks are pretty small. So I think you run a risk now of being one of the few people. I think there's probably, I forget the numbers, it's a couple hundred people are running it now on mainnet. So hopefully it's more distributed, so we'll see. I think in theory, if every single person was serving them, then there wouldn't be much overhead in enabling this.
I think another important distinction between compact block filters and the prior light client protocol is in the prior protocol, it was sort of interactive. The client would create this data structure, send it to the server would have to interpret that data structure and then send back kind of specialized information to that client. So it was heavier on the server in that sense. In the new compact block filter scheme, these filters that get created and shared out are basically the same for everybody. It's a fixed data structure per block, basically. So what that also opens up, and I don't know if it's going to be talked about later, I don't know if in the book he talks more about this, but it means that even though currently Bitcoin Core can serve these compact block, it generates them and can serve them, in theory, anybody who gets one can also share it out. So like a light client, I don't think any of them do it right now, but if I get a bunch of compact block filter headers, and then I get a bunch of compact block filters for those headers, they are in theory valid for me to then share out to other light clients. Like I don't even have to be a full node to share these things because they're pre-computed and of course all that, kind of self-validating in a way. So I think that's also a very interesting aspect of this compact block filter technology for a light client specifically. And again, for Lightning, that's great because you could, if you're not running a full node, you could still have some information you can share with other peers. that will help scale this network out and reduce load and everything without having to be even a full node. So it's interesting future direction I hope it goes in.
Hey guys, I'm looking at the chat here, and also has a question about neutrino and Electrum, and so I was wondering if maybe somebody could, talk a little bit about the difference between, say, using something like Electrum and neutrino versus running a full node to help them out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to take it if you want. Basically, the idea is with Electrum, typically, well, I guess I don't know what's typical usage, but at the core, there's something, you run a full node, you run a Bitcoin node, someone has to be doing that. Most of the peers on the network, well, that might not even be true, but are running these full nodes, and Electrum is sort of an overlay on top of a node. And so the idea is that you want to ask your node certain things like, is this transaction valid for me? What is the UTXO balance look like for certain transactions or addresses that I care about as a wallet user? And Bitcoin Core by itself can't answer those questions quickly. A lot of the block explorers also to do things like, blockstream.info or blockchain.info to show that information, it would be really slow to calculate everything using Bitcoin Core. And so things like Electrum, it's software that creates a bunch of different indexes and APIs on top of all the Bitcoin data and allows you to query them in a much faster way. And so a lot of people run these Electrum servers, and there's one called Explorer, which is similar. We haven't talked about, just to add more confusion. But there's a couple basically tools to help you query the Bitcoin data more efficiently, depending on your use case. And so someone running an Electrum server is it's just something they're running on top of their Bitcoin node to help query it faster. So you might connect to that directly, depending on what your wallet needs to do. And Neutrino is sort of different. Neutrino is just a different type of node. And so it's a lightweight node that doesn't store the history, but still connects to peers to get the information it needs to run a wallet.
And just to add a little, maybe more confusion on the Electrum side, there's a lot of people who have historically used wallets that are connecting to public Electrum servers. So there's a big chunk of trust right there. But it is also possible to run your own Electrum server that's designed just for your own, personal transactions. So like an Umbrel or other full node software can spin up Electrum just for your own use. So you're not losing any trust there. It's just that's easier software for your wallet to interact with.
I think it's probably also worth pointing out, just for anyone who might not be aware, who might be coming into Lightning for the first time with these first two chapters here, that the entire reason that we're even talking about having a node is because essentially, even though we typically say with Lightning that you're conducting things off chain, your node, your Lightning node, still needs to be able to see the blockchain, because it still needs to be able to see it and be able to say, okay, my payment channel, the funding transaction for my payment channel is there. I can see that it's there, or the channel is closing, so that I.
Still there, Stephen?
We lost Stephen, but yeah, actually, that's a really good point. Maybe we can go back to I wrote down the lightness. In the first chapter, there's the lightning fairness protocols. So there's obviously there's a lot of cryptography in Lightning, but these are like a few of the fairness protocols of how Lightning is trying to be trust minimized. So there is, make sure you have a signed refund transaction before publishing the funding transaction. When the channel moves to a new state, the old state is revoked. Someone who broadcasts it could lose their funds. And then when forwarding a payment, you can either get a refund or get paid by the node preceding you. So like, especially in 1 and 2, you're going to be interacting a lot with a node to figure out what is true on the main chain before you're comfortable going forward with doing this on Lightning.
And by node, you mean a full Bitcoin node? Because you've kind of got two concepts. You've got your full Bitcoin nodes you're monitoring for what FuturePaul just mentioned, but then you've got your Lightning node too, right? It's a separate. It really is a separate node because it talks peer-to-peer in a different way than the Bitcoin peer-to-peer protocol. So that's definitely a nice distinction to make between which peer network you're talking on for different operations.
And I think that's really interesting, because if you understand how Bitcoin nodes and all of this stuff works, Lightning is just so different. All the dynamics, the behavior, the way things connect, and the game mechanics, incentives. There's no mining, but you have all the fee mechanisms happening. It's just so different. It's like you have to start learning things from scratch, and you kind of have to forget some of the things that you maybe thought would be the same. So I found that interesting.
And it's not, you basically have both fee mechanisms, right? Because you have the on-chain fee mechanisms to say open or close a channel, but then you have, when you're actually interacting on those channels, Lightning fee mechanisms for.
Sure.
Yeah, and that's
on the second page, there's this. I think it's the second page. There's this part where it's like Lightning Wallet. The term Lightning Wallet is somewhat ambiguous, and could, as it can describe a broad variety of components. And with Bitcoin on chain, we typically say, well, at the very core, a wallet is, a Keystore, right? But and like I think earlier in the chapter, they were talking about non-custodial is just you being in control of your keys. Now with Lightning, those keys has to be online all the time, right? In this kind of like hot wallet or whatever. So I find it interesting, like, how we're going to be classifying this new set of wallets now, because it's not just the keys, it has to have other kinds of components on it to be able to operate non-custodially.
Which components are those?
Well, we're still trying to figure that out right now, right? We're trying to like in mobile environments, we have to try to figure out what can we offload while still maintaining this non-custodial property.
A question maybe I'd like to clarify for myself is, I know this and I've heard this, but like people say, oh, with a Lightning node, you need to be online all the time. And I'm not sure what that, I think that this is because if somebody tries to publish the wrong state, then you need to be able to sort of publish the actual latest state and then steal all the funds from the channel. Is that the only reason why you're expected to be online all the time? And also, is that where the watchtowers come in, I think? Because obviously you're looking at a ton of wallets here. None of those wallets are online all the time. So do they have watchtowers working for them? Or is it, I'm not sure of the whole setup there. Does anybody?
So I think the watchtowers are, they pretty much help you defend against someone publishing like an old state. But the always online aspect is like some components of the node, I guess. I don't know what they are right now, but the node needs to be online so that the payment can make that final hop, right? Because when you generate an invoice and give it to someone, it has to go through. It has to get relayed through this network, the Lightning network, through each node that passes the message on to the next person. I think it uses this thing called like Tor routing, right? Onion routing. Yeah, so it's going from node to node. Now, if you're not online to receive that message, then that becomes a problem, right? Then you're not able to capture the payment.
However,
I think part of the, yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say trampoline nodes can temporarily hold payments for a node. So if, let's say, your wallet provider kind of handles routing for your wallet, which is more lightweight, it can actually advertise your node to say, like, okay, I'm accepting routes to that node. And then if you're not online, it can hold that payment for you, where there is a little bit of trust involved. And I think that's what happens a lot of times with those wallets that only connect to one provider. Right, Johns? We discussed that one?
Yeah, we're still going back and forth on that one, but yeah, pretty much that's it.
Well, and sorry, go on, Steve.
Oh no, I was just going to say that part of the always on situation is that every time you update the balance of a channel that you are participating in, it does require you to sign that update with your keys. Like there's some, to update a state, you're basically creating you're invalidating your old one, but creating a new state, which requires signing a new transaction. Even though you're not putting it on the Bitcoin blockchain, you still need to pass those updates back and forth. So that's also, and also if you're just sort of a leaf node, I guess you only have to do it if it's your channel. If you're making a transaction on the Lightning Network, as I understand it. But if you're like a full routing node too, even if you're not participating directly, you're still routing payments for other people. You have to be online to update those channel states. That's my high level understanding.
And I forgot where it was, maybe on some Stack Overflow poster. So I remember reading something about some wallet developer, and they said that something very tricky that they're trying to figure out is how to regularly wake up the node on the device in order to sync whatever needs to be synced. So there is effort in there.
That sounds like a mobile issue, definitely too, because if if you've got a mobile device, anybody who's worked with, like, say, Android, it'll run, it doesn't want to keep your app running all the time. It tries to kill it, especially if you're not looking right at it actually knows if you're looking at the app on the top of the screen. And if it's sort of a background, if you've shifted to another app, it's going to potentially try to kill it to save memory and CPU and battery. All those things are trying to being optimized. So it becomes a difficulty.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I didn't know you had to be online. Like, this so how does it work for mobile wallets? I mean, it almost means that all of the mobile wallets are not, you're not really receiving payment. Like the wallet is not itself, it's just an interface for somebody else who's actually actively online at all times, who can do that signature back and forth, because otherwise you'd never, like, your wallet is 90% off, right? Or whatnot.
Well, and that's why it's definitely an overloaded term, and why it's good to kind of decompose these, because you have your user interface that's on your phone, but you can have a Lightning node, running on a Raspberry Pi at your house or in the cloud, or async servers or whatever. Someone else can be running that node on your behalf, or you can be running the node on your behalf and fully keep up with everything, and then you just need to open up the UI if you want to do spend something.
Yeah, but like Steve mentioned, if you're most of the mobile clients, if they're not like you're talking about, Paul, where you're just sort of, it's more of an interface to your node, you can still you're just not routing payments. Like, you don't have to be online that much to just send and receive as a leaf node on the edge of the network. And I know a couple of the wallets are experimenting with doing push notifications to tell the user to open back up the app and things like that, in different weird UXs. But one nice thing is when you're receiving payments, you're typically active, like it's something you're doing, like you're part of it, at least right now. Maybe that will change when things like Keysend become more Keysend and offers kind of become more popular. But yeah, I guess it really depends on the user's use case. Like, I don't think most people are going to be running, routing nodes are expected to be always on their phone.
So if you're not routing and there's a watchtower to make sure that one of your channel peers isn't like trying to maliciously close on you, then you could just pop in occasionally and don't really have to stress about being online.
Yeah,
all the time.
even without a watchtower, you don't have to stress too much. I think we'll learn in the book, but I forget what it is. It's like 48 hours even, or maybe longer, that you have to do the punishment transaction. So it's not like, oh, every 10 minutes you got to be checking. It's like once a day, is fine. So I don't know maybe what kind of UX will develop around that, but.
And just to be really reckless about this, I've been traveling for the past month. I had my Node unplugged in my bag, and I plugged it back in. And hey, my channel partner hadn't closed on me, and everything's fine. No harm done other than I didn't route anything.
That's interesting. Yeah, I would have assumed they would have figured you died or something. Like they have like some kind of ping pong messaging going back and forth to make sure that you're still there. That's interesting that it was alive after.
There's a timeout, and I think you can set it at,
Okay.
like per channel, like how long you're going to wait before you kill it.
Awesome. Yeah.
I think there are also some mechanisms in the mobile development frameworks that, like you said, the kind of push notifications. I think you can. It might be necessary in these mobile apps to kind of have two bits of software. You have the UI that people can go ahead and kill, and then maybe this sort of notifier that will do periodic little checks and kind of stay alive. I think that's going to probably be an area of investigation to figure out how to split the app up so you have just a little tiny bit of code running just to kind of do those ping pongs and maybe receive those push payments. Try to make something like that work. Because I think that's really the ultimate goal, or it is a goal for some of these, for some use cases here, because not everybody's going to be able to run a node on a Pi at home. They may not have a computer at home or any ability to run a computer at home. So the more we can put on the mobile devices, the better, if it's possible. Even if it's just a leaf kind of node in terms of Lightning Network. But I guess I'm thinking more of these sort of South American, the countries where people don't have, necessarily PCs or Raspberry Pis at home, or even internet at home. Potentially, it might be a completely mobile user.
Yeah, I'd love to see the wallet setup in Bitcoin Beach added to this little table, because I think it's like the most possible custodial wallet as far as I know. It's like an Uncle Jim model where you're just fully trusting this one centralized node operator.
Yeah, it is an interesting concept there, because it's custodial, but it's sort of anybody. It's not like you're running anybody could basically be their own hosted wallet, right, or their own custodial wallet. So you have these sort of little micro. I think the concept there is you're a micro bank, or micro custodials for just your neighborhood or something. Which is, it's different. You're not like, some huge provider for the whole world. You're just kind of keeping it local. So that is an interesting concept, especially for something like Lightning that does have a lot of state and a lot of resource requirements for the nodes, the end user nodes. So I know that in India, one of the devices that people would like to support doesn't even run. It's not even a smartphone. It's more like a flip phone, and it runs a version of like a JavaScript, like a browser, basically a browser UI. So they would like to be able to run a wallet in this. It's basically like a Mozilla browser, Firefox browser sort of thing, but all running in WASM or JavaScript or something. So that'll be chaos, chaos. So, and I think that will be possible. I mean, it's definitely a possible thing, for a certain class of Lightning wallet to do. This chaos, KAIOS, is going to be supporting WASM, and a lot of languages could be compiled into WASM and run on that kind of small device. So that'll be fun to see how much can get working on that.
There's so much complexity here, and ideally users don't realize any of it. So interesting.
Yeah, I think the other thing that we haven't talked a lot about, and I think he talks a little bit about in the book, is this concept of the Keystore and how that can be made. I mean, how that's like, especially for this more custodial thing where, his definition at least is that you are custodial if you control your own keys. Like that's kind of the real litmus test in terms of custodial. But then that brings up the topic of, how do you make it easy for a user to back up those keys and things? And then I guess I don't know if he talked about it. I forgot now if for Lightning, you also have to keep these channel states as part of your information if you want to be able to restore your wallet on another device, in addition to the keys. Does he talk about that? Does anybody remember?
I think that was on the first page.
Okay, because I know he definitely made a point. He made a point on his table that custodial meant you can, you have sole access to those private keys. You're not delegating that to a service provider. But yeah, then that, that's obviously true for Bitcoin wallets. It's also true for Lightning wallets. With the addition of with the addition of other Lightning information, you also need to keep track of to, do penalty transactions or.
This is the time for Connor to show LDK and the latest Blue Wallet Alpha, where they basically push it to iCloud or Google Drive automatically. Both the keys for a backup and the channel backups. Right, Connor? Did I understand that correctly?
Cloud provider they're actually using though. I don't know if they're just using the native iCloud and Google Drive services or something different. But yeah, I guess the idea is that you could use any storage backup mechanism you want. There could be cloud, file system, some external server somewhere. And yeah, I guess that is one of the, without going into LDK too much, that's one of the things LDK is trying to kind of push, this kind of customization of, instead of just having this kind of monolithic node running on the mobile, it would give you the ability to outsource routing or outsource the backing up of channel state and keys, a custom network stack for sending messages and stuff as well. And then with that, I think will give us a greater ability to customize the UX around those things as well.
Yeah, I think the book's out of date in this case because it has Blue Wallet as fully custodial, but using the LDK, it's going to be more the hybrid. I mean, I guess by his definition, using LDK and LDK backing up its own keys would be non-custodial. So maybe we can get him to update the book before it goes out.
Do you imagine people opening more channels, more than one channels in the future? Or are they just going to be connected to like one really well-connected LSP on node or something? I ask this because at some point, like we're talking about like trust in decentralized networks. If you are only then connected to like, one node, one partner, then, there's an opportunity there for them to start censoring your transactions or, your payments, right? So in a way, you're kind of like, if you choose one, then you're kind of like trusting them quite a bit.
I also think if you have just one connection, you're also giving up a little privacy too, because now they will see all your, sort of your activity. It's more like metadata about your activity that, they'll just see that you're making some transactions, but maybe not have all the details. But that could also be information you may not want to leak out. Well, if you connect to multiple peers, that information, they won't have the entire picture of your usage, like even just knowing when you're online, for instance.
Yeah. Also, like reliability. If the node isn't up, has its own downtime, then you won't be able to transact during those times. So I think, ideally, I think a big part of it is the option, like the option to opt out, or the option to connect to multiple nodes. That's important. Like with the traditional financial system, you know, this is it. This is your option. You're forced into it by law. Whereas maybe most people will end up with one channel just because it's easier, and it's, you know, like a large majority of these aren't going to be probably technical enough to know how to manage channels, and hopefully that's something that gets pushed to the back of a wallet. And so I think the ability to maybe have a small number that are rotated or something like that, the option to rotate them, would be kind of some cool ideal scenario. But I think it's probably still early, and we'll see how that plays out.
I'm also interested here if it will kind of naturally evolve that more channels are needed. So let's say I have a small channel that's, let's say, 50 euros, and I just use it to, I don't know, play Lightning Spin or whatever it is, small stuff. But then for some reason, let's say I go on an exchange and I purchase 100 euros of Lightning Bitcoin, and they want to send it to me through Lightning, or I want to withdraw it through Lightning, so I have a channel with them because they'll be easier in the future. Back and forth will be easier. In that case, I mean, there might be other use cases too in the future where it's more practical to open more channels for specific services.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Also, I don't know if anyone's familiar with exactly what Moon is doing, but Moonwallet, I don't know how to say it, Moonwallet, they're actually, I think they're one of the only ones doing this, where what you're saying is they could also, depending on how the exchanges and other services are operating, if they kind of opted into this, there are ways to sort of splice and join your channels so you can kind of only have one. Like behind the scenes, you still have one, but it's being managed in a way that you're sort of closing and reopening and merging and splitting these channels as you use the network. It seems a little more complicated, but yeah, I am curious. It does seem like, at least for now, the natural thing is to end up with a couple, you know, depending on the core services you're using. It's definitely going to be a UX challenge for wallets.
I definitely want to learn a lot more about this, just because it seems to me that if your wallet is trying to just use heuristics, like, well, what's the most likely way to get this through? It's like, well, if I've got a big channel with a really central node, I'll just go through there. And so I know that's a lot of the fun about Lightning early on, basically, is that, you know, this is going to be a very centralizing thing. And so if all the UX, it always works way better, the payment goes through faster, the payment doesn't fail very often when I use just like one or two really centralized big nodes, you know, that could be a problem down the road if there aren't enough decentralizing forces to counteract that.
Yeah, agreed. It's to PayPal and Venmo, right?
Well, I guess
would
we would
assume
get
one of the.
Sorry, go on.
I was gonna say, I assume maybe one of the forces that will help keep that a bit less centralized is this idea that you can always come in and offer lower fees. So it's a chance, unless there's like the big channels can do it at like no fees at all, and then they can really eat the whole thing basically. But otherwise, I would assume that as you get bigger and bigger, there's an incentive to maybe up your fees if that's the best way to do it. Then you can charge a little bit more, and then there's always basically the opportunity is open for somebody to find a route that's just beside the big one, but offers way less fees, and then that sort of like keeps that game going. Where I don't know.
So I saw a Twitter thread here from somebody who spent the last 2 or 3 months or so trying to become a profitable Lightning node operator. And she wrote that initially she tried to connect to the big nodes, the big pipes, but she realized that that's not the most economic way to do it. It was better to connect to smaller ones and try to identify routes that money flows through kind of frequently. And try to, so it seemed like from her experience, which Patricia seems to know her, she said she's awesome. Okay, cool. It seemed like there was a model that kind of pushes towards smaller channels and not everything towards bigger channels. Of course, that's one experience. I don't know if that's globally, the case, but that was one story there.
It seems like the most important fact. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Steve. I was just going to ask a question. Does anybody have any other ideas as to what are some things that could be done to keep it more decentralized?
Yeah, I mean, I was actually just thinking that the factor that's going to be keeping it decentralized is this open standard. You know, the fact that, you know, like if you're a PayPal, you have a PayPal API and you write an application, it has to connect to PayPal. At least we have with Lightning as an open standard, as long as nobody tries to make like, I guess the real long-term risk here is that you get these big Lightning nodes and for some reason everybody's connecting to a few big Lightning nodes and then they try to basically lock you in somehow. You know, they try to lock you in by changing the protocol somehow or somehow making it so that when you write your client, it only can connect to them. As long as that's not the case, as long as you can connect to anybody, at least you do have that optionality of, you know, you might have a big channel with the PayPal node, but you can always switch it to the Cash App node or to the River Wallet node or whoever else might be a big provider, but stays open source or stays open protocol. Because, you know, that's what in the past internet protocols, that's the strategy that these guys have used. Like, you know, Microsoft is a great example. They tried to capture the browser market and then make their own extensions and make it so that it was all proprietary and you had to use their browser and all that. They failed, or at least seem to be have failed. So that's a good kind of counterpoint to that protocol centralization, at least. Hopefully, you know, that's a good goal for Lightning to keep that open.
So,
Well,
go ahead, John.
yeah, I would say actually, since you know, like Bitcoin design, I think you know the UX layer is the part that's gonna keep things decentralized because although you know you have all these options underlying, all these standards underlying, if it's only accessible to like people on the command line, for instance, to be able to know how to like swap to a different channel or whatever, or if the applications are designed in a way that they only offer one channel for you to connect with, instead of being able to choose your own. This discoverability is going to be an important. If you aren't able to discover different people to connect with and whatnot, then you know the majority of users wouldn't be able to, and they would just end up with a centralized hub. So
Hold that thought real quick. Adi asked totally correctly, we're over 1 hour now, and asked how long we want to continue. As long as you want to. If anybody needs to go, have dinner, breakfast, whatever is appropriate in your time zone, feel free to hop out. And anybody else can talk until Jitsi goes offline and kicks us out. So, but sorry, Johns, let's get back to you.
I would just mention about the timing. I would say that it might help the group at least have an expectation of how long it will be if we said that we should try to cover what we want to talk about for the chapter in that first hour. And then anything after that is sort of like gravy or is sort of expanding rather than like if you're 45 minutes in and you haven't talked about like this big part of the chapter that you want to talk about, and you just count on it going for an hour and a half or an hour 45 minutes, but other people can't stay that whole time. I think it's a good idea to keep it at 1 hour to be like the expectation is we try to go through the basic of what we wanted to talk for that week in the chapter in that hour. So if you write it in your agenda, you can write 1 hour, for example. So I'll be writing 1 hour in my agenda as an example, but of course, happy to stay for longer and on some weeks, but that's sort of like the my 2 cents that I'd like to throw in here.
Yeah, and this was the first session. Some areas of the content we didn't get into at all, but it's a really good time to give feedback. If this works for everyone, great. We'll just continue. If people want to do it differently, we can also change it up. So just shout out. So sorry, Johns. Let's get back to you.
no, well, no, that was mainly it. You know, like allowing users to be able to easily discover these things that we're talking about, whether they're channels and like alternative channels that they could swap out to, providing those functions within the applications and whatnot. We need to, make sure we are able to surface some of these things to the user so they have access to them. Otherwise, then you could have as many open standards. If people don't have access to it, then it's definitely gonna create a centralizing force.
Yeah, and somebody mentioned Moon here earlier. So something Moon does is submarine swaps, and they use some centralized providers. So I can send in on-chain Bitcoin, and I get Lightning or so, and that's done by a provider who manages these swaps. And that's one of the areas where I thought it would be fantastic if I, on my umbrella, I could just say, hey, I want to be a submarine swap provider. And here's X amount of on-chain and Lightning, and if anybody wants to grab a channel from me, I pay me 10 sats or so and I'll open up a channel and whatever. That it just kind of allows all these other participants also to take on some of these economic roles in this whole system. I think that would be fantastic. And maybe that's what TBD is going to do, the new Square venture, who knows. And the Lightning Labs team, they have a tool called Terminal, no Loop, not Loop. Lightning Pool.
It's one of those.
I tried it out.
Liquidity.
I offered some liquidity for people to lease channels from me 2 days ago. Nothing has happened, but I'm experimenting with these things. I feel like, Alexa, that would be a kind of a decentralizing force to allow more people to participate in these things.
Lightning Network Plus is also a really good one for creating these ring of fires and stuff. It's a really cool design as well.
Yeah, I've done that twice of the two of those, and it's been both have been very quick. Within a day, you're basically set up with new channels.
I think John's question though is like, is there some sort of automated way to find these things? Or right now, pretty much setting up a Lightning channel is going on a Telegram channel and asking for someone to accept your connection, something like that.
Yeah, check out the link in the chat, Lightning Network Plus.
Lightning Network Plus, okay. Yeah, that sounds good. I'll check it.
Yeah, I think
it's very manual. Oh, please go ahead.
I was going to say one thing that was in the I think the second chapter, and I think what I hope we'll see a lot of wallets do is kind of offer, at least to new users, like some options for some nodes to connect to, like async lets you connect to them. I know I haven't used a wallet in a while actually, but like Zap, the old Jack Mahler's wallet, used to let you kind of show you a whole thing, like connect to Bitrefill, connect to their node. And so I think hopefully we'll see like some optionality there and from the wallet providers to say like, hey, here's like 10 we recommend. I know L&D was also working on autopilot kind of built into the node. So the idea would be that it would automatically, using some heuristics and probably some machine learning at some point, to kind of keep you well connected to the network. I don't know. It feels like they kind of stopped that effort, but maybe we'll have something like that built into a lot of wallets and nodes to help hide this complexity, where they can kind of keep you balanced and well connected for you.
It sounds like another cool, like small business opportunity. Like Christoph was saying, like with, maybe I could provide liquidity to this submarine swap thing. Well, maybe I could run a small business that like, hey, I sell nice little channel connections that you trust me, we're buddies, and it's not a fully trusted situation, but it's something that you'd be nice to be guided through and helped out with, but you don't have to necessarily just go to the biggest thing you can find to get a good experience.
Yeah, and I think also like Bitrefill has this, and Y'all's, the Alex Bosworth site, will sell you a channel and things like that. There are people selling channels, and I assume once all the major exchanges also will have this functionality soon to let you withdraw and probably open a channel when they do that. So it'll be exciting to see what, kind of Bitfinex is leading the charge there, and I know Kraken is coming, but they might also have a big say for at least a lot of initial users, how they how they get started on Lightning might be through there as well.
And maybe that's also one way that Galloy and Bitcoin Beach and these kind of community wallets can start, if it's much easier for people to make their resources available in a trustless way to people around them potentially. But I don't think that exists.
Yeah. Also, there's similar to the Bitcoin Beach stuff was LND Hub, which is what Blue Wallet is using until they switch to LDK, and it's basically the same idea. Like someone runs this hub, and then they can subdivide it into a bunch of user accounts. But the reason I'm bringing it up and as a concern they have, and I think it's one of the motivating factors for moving, is because I think it depending on your jurisdiction, it makes you a money transmitter, and so. It's a real concern for some of these wallets and services that don't want to have to deal with all the licensing and regulation involved. And so I don't know how that will, like the Bitcoin Beach model, will play out in the long term. Like, yeah, if you're doing it with your friends and it's small enough, that's fine. But I feel like soon as you cross some threshold, you might have to watch out for the government.
So how well did we cover those 2 pages today?
I think it was also a beginning, like a sort of like an introduction conversation that we needed to tackle a bunch of stuff, set the tone. And
yeah, I feel like I want to go in there and redesign those screens here and come up with some UI for channel management now.
I don't know if Eclair is still super used, maintained. I think that their Phoenix wallet is like they're putting more effort on the Phoenix wallet. I'm not sure, or maybe they're continuing to do both equally because it's the same team. So
Mhm.
I don't know if anybody knows them more than me.
Yeah, I don't know. That was my understanding as well, though, that Phoenix was kind of their flagship, consumer product and much easier to use wallet. But yeah, I don't know if they're maintaining Eclair, what the state is. It's good little research maybe for next week.
Yeah, well, John's is interviewing all kinds of wallet developer teams. That might be one of the. He just hopped off, but might be one of the teams he's talking to. Maybe we could find out. Why would they abandon this old project and start a different one?
Well, the thing is, this Eclair is more of like a power user type of thing where you're managing your channels and you're managing your liquidity and it's just like you have full control over everything, but it's really hard for just, a random new person to Bitcoin and Lightning to get started. And so they created Phoenix Wallet, which is doing a lot of the things I think similar to Moon and a couple of Breeze, a couple of the other guys. They've all started playing around with how can you onboard a new user as seamlessly as possible without having them worry about, okay, now I got to move my Bitcoin here. Okay, now I have to open a channel and now I have to make sure I have liquidity in both directions. All this stuff they're trying to get rid of and push to the back by doing neat tricks with like running, basically having you connect directly to their node and then playing tricks with their node where they can let you receive instantly and they'll hold on to the payment until they have a channel with you open and things like that.
So they had their power user playground, then they figured, okay, we need something more consumer focused.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll start from scratch.
Yeah. Instead of like toggling it in the UI, which I thought maybe was another option, they kind of went for a complete kind of rebrand.
I mean, considering how quickly the technology changes, maybe that's sensible from that perspective too.
Yeah. I mean, they're also maintaining one of the full node implementations. So they're kind of, I don't know how big their team is, but they're kind of doing a lot. Seems like.
Yeah, they're busy. I really like Phoenix, just like the model where I've read like their FAQs and I've been using it. And so far, like, I think they're touching something pretty cool there. It's very different. Like they're super open about it. They're like, what we do is like, you know, it's not for the power user. It's really, for example, there's like privacy issues with it. Like we know all of your transactions. That's not what we're trying to, you know, if you're trying to mitigate against those types of concerns, this is not the wallet for you, like whatever. But then the end user experience is just really, really neat. You got this one balance. You don't have on-chain fees. There's no on-chain. There's no such thing as on-chain with Phoenix. So you like everything is immediately in Lightning. So you put $20 on it and off you go, right? So
that's the thing, though. That's the thing, though. From what I've heard last year at some point, and I don't know if that's still the case, is that it's a totally unscalable business model, that they eat those first channel fees for all of their users, that if they have 1 million users, they go bankrupt, right? They need some funding from somewhere. And it seems like that is a really difficult aspect for all these wallets to figure out how they manage the fees, especially if they want to support the automatic swap between on-chain and Lightning through, and then and then also get a lot of users. That seems to be kind of unresolved at the moment, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, it seems like one answer would just be not to eat the fees, but still they could still do all the nice UX things where they hold on to the in-flight payment and then wait until your channel's open. So you still don't have to manage the channels, but they will take, the fee out of the amount that they eventually open the channel with you for. So like they're not paying the fee, but you still get this nice channel onboarding experience.
Yeah, and that works if you already have Bitcoin funds, or you're gonna make a payment through a credit card and load it up or so.
Yeah. I think another angle will be interesting, like I mentioned, is the exchanges, because that's where everyone pretty much gets their Bitcoin, at least for the most part. And so that could be a nice way to get sort of instantly on to Lightning, like you never go on chain that way. I don't know. The exchanges also have more revenue than wallets to afford paying those fees, but potentially. We'll see.
You're talking about the fees to open up the channels initially?
Yeah, I guess they also have incentive to not let you withdraw, but we'll see how that plays out.
I mean, there's also this.
I wanted to ask about this too, like their model for. They say they're non-custodial, and they give you when you fire it up, they give you 12 words. So you're in charge of an on-chain wallet, even though you don't have funds on it. And the way it works, it seems to be that if you want to close your channels for whatever reason, something happens or whatever, you go through these buttons where you ask to basically close the channel, and it asks you like 5 times, with big red buttons, like, are you sure you really want to do this? This is like the nuclear option. But if you do it, then they close the channel and they send the funds to this wallet that's under your control. But now I'm thinking, since they have to basically host your channels and they are your node, how does that work? Like they could still decide to not send the funds to you if they close. Like I don't know if that's done, if that's fully outside of their control, or how that works.
I guess I don't. If someone knows, speak. Otherwise, I'm gonna guess. But I don't know how it actually works with Phoenix. But I'm wondering if a lot of the tricks that I was reading back when I was kind of researching how them and Moon are doing a lot of these tricks. It's the fact that they're the last hop on the way to you that is enabling them to do all the tricks. It's not that you don't actually own 1/2 of the channel. And so like you still actually own the keys to close the channel. They're not going to have to do it for you. They just get to do a bunch of cool tricks when they route all the payments through them. That's my understanding, at least.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because if you're in essentially a multi-sig with them, and then they can wait till you connect up to them again to do the updates, because they know they've got 1/2 and you've got 1/2. And
Yeah, well, you can also always in Lightning, you can always close unilaterally. You don't need, like, they sign a refund transaction to you when the channel is initially opened, and so you don't need to actually close out your funds. You can always just close. But you can even receive in this case without a channel because they can hold on to it for you. They pretend that they routed it to you. They do these cool tricks like that.
Okay. I wonder if it'll ever be a case where we were talking about exchanges as being maybe a first point of contact, where you could have a sort of non-custodial exchange in the sense that, say, you send them some fiat and then they just put that directly into a channel for you. They open a channel back to you directly. You don't have a custodial balance with them. You have a Lightning balance.
Yeah, go check out. I don't know if they're still running or they got shut down yet, but LN Markets, I don't know if it's .com or .org, but they were doing this where you don't ever actually deposit into the exchange. You just open a channel, and then you can trade with other people who have the channels open with them directly and not have, like, they're more of like an order book, I guess, but they also facilitate the trade. But you don't actually.
Do they take the fiat then? So they convert the fiat into a Bitcoin balance in a channel?
Oh, in this case, they're not. It's not a fiat exchange. Sorry, it's like a. It's kind of like a BitMEX where you're.
I see.
You're trading.
So take like a.
Yeah.
I see. They'll take like a stable coin or something.
Yeah, it's probably using Tether or something, or they just peg it to the. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know exactly what they're doing, but yeah, they don't actually, as far as I remember, don't do the fiat exchange.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. Cool.
Thanks for joining today, Thunder Biscuit.
Yeah,
I'm gonna head off too. Thanks, guys. Talking to you.
Everybody hopping out now, or?
Looks like it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, we did talk for almost an hour and a half. I'm gonna stop the recording here now too.